expected someone like you. What did you expect? Are you an assassin?
I'm a soldier.
Hello there, and welcome once again, wherever you may be. I've got a long passage from Fritz today, and also some stories of my experiences with English people. But let me go back to that image of the lateral octave that I put up last week. Gurdieff talks about how vibrations can pass through the elements of an octave as they interact with each other, and momentarily it changes their character. In that case it was the sun, which is soul in the cosmic or universal octave, but it started a new octave, a descending octave towards the earth, to cause something to happen there, and so sounded as do. So there is an order based on what is manifestly created, and then as they sing to each other, they can produce different notes according to their relationships. In terms of the spiritual journey, it's very important because post-initiation or illumination from the top, the work has to be done lower down, in the middle story, at the beginning of the middle story, which is exactly how Gurdieff teaches us to be. But this is not widely understood in spiritual circles. They mistake the illumination at the top for our real work, which is lower down. And you see many spiritual people desperately try to enter heaven from above, when actually the work is from below, and it's only the initiation that is at the top. And the reason for that is that there is an interleavening, a nesting. For instance, I have learned that the ova that a woman carries inside of her, in fact, are created by her mother. So they're created 2 generations apart, interleavening things. This is a long extract from Fritz. He began by asking me about the exercise that had been given to all of us to do, and which I referred to previously as self-observation. He said that it was a very difficult exercise to do, and that he wanted me to do it with my entire concentration, as constantly as possible. He also said that the main difficulty with this exercise, as with most exercises that he did, or would in the future give to me, or to any of his students, was that to do them properly it was necessary not to expect results. In this specific exercise, what was important was to see oneself, to observe one's mechanical, automatic, reactionary behaviour without comment, and without making any attempt to change that behaviour. If change, he said, then we'll never see reality. We'll only see change. When begin to know self, then change will come, or can make change if wish, if such change desirable. He went on to say that his work was not only very difficult, but could also be very dangerous for some people. This work not for everyone, he said. For example, if I wish to learn to become millionaire, necessary to devote all early life to this aim and no other. If wish to become priest, philosopher, teacher, businessman, should not come here. Here only teach possibility how become man such as not known in modern times, particularly in Western world. He then asked me to look out of the window and to tell him what I saw. I said that from that window all I could see was an oak tree, and what he asked was on the oak tree. I told him acorns. How many acorns? When I replied rather uncertainly that I did not know, he said impatiently, "Not exactly, not ask that. Guess how many." I said that I supposed there were several thousand of them. He agreed and then asked me how many of the acorns would become oak trees. I answered that I supposed only 5 or 6 of them would actually develop into trees, if that many. He nodded. Perhaps only 1. Perhaps not even 1. Must learn from nature. Man is also organism. Nature makes many acorns, but possibility to become tree exists for only few acorns. Same with man. Many men born, but only few grow. People think this waste, think nature waste. Not so. Rest become fertilizer. Go back into earth and create possibility for more acorns. Once in a while more tree, more real man. Nature always give, but only give possibility. To become real oak or real man must make effort. You understand this. My work, this institute, not for fertilizer, for a real man only, but must also understand fertilizer necessary to nature, possibility for real tree, real man, also depend just this fertilizer. After a rather long silence he continued, "In West, your world, is belief that man have soul given by God. Not so. Nothing given by God, only nature give, and nature only give possibility for soul, not give soul. Must acquire soul through work, but unlike tree, man have many possibilities. As man now exists, he have also possibility grow by accident, grow wrong way. Man can become many things, not just fertilizer, not just real man. Can become what you call good or evil, not proper things for man. Real man not good or evil, real man only conscious, only wish acquire soul for proper development." I had listened to him, concentrated and straining, and my only feeling, I was 12 then, was one of confusion, incomprehension. I sensed and felt the importance of what he was saying, but I did not understand it. As if aware of this, he said, "Think of good and evil like right and left hand. Man always have 2 hands, 2 sides of self, good and evil. One can destroy the other. Must have aim to make both hands work together. Must acquire 3rd thing that make peace between 2 hands, between impulse for good and impulse for evil. Among the purposes of all leaders, messiahs, messengers from the gods and so forth, there was one fundamental and very important purpose, to find some means by which the 2 sides of man, and therefore the 2 sides of the earth, could live together in peace and harmony. He said that time was very short. It was necessary to achieve this harmony as soon as possible to avoid complete disaster. Philosophies, religions, and other such movements had all failed to accomplish this aim, and the only possible way to accomplish it was through the individual development of man. As an individual developed his own unknown potentialities, he would become strong and would in turn influence many more people, if enough individuals could develop themselves even partially into genuine natural men, able to use the real potentialities that were proper to mankind, each such individual would then be able to convince and win over as many as 100 other men, who would each in his turn, upon achieving development, be able to influence another 100, and so on. He added grimly that he was in no sense joking when he had said that time was short. Further, he said that history had already proven to us that such tools as politics, religion, and any of the other organized movements which treated man in the mass, and not as individual beings, were failures, that they would always be failures, and that the separate distinct growth of each individual in the world was the only possible solution. This part is from Ouspensky. I already knew then, as an undoubted fact, that beyond the thin film of false reality, there existed another reality from which, for some reason, something separated us. The miraculous was a penetration into this unknown reality. I will comment on the whole thing together. Here Gurdieff was speaking almost 100 years ago, and the world has decayed very much. But no doubt it is the West that is the target of the dissolution. The bottom line is that there is no way to evolve without doing difficult, three-centered things. There is no shortcut. Gurdjieff's journey was to become a master of many trades. Physical work, emotional work, work in commerce, work teaching. This morning I had to do some angle grinding, and it was difficult work, and I've been putting it off. It's difficult, dangerous, and the truth is that although I did manage to do the job that I wanted to, unexpectedly and in an unplanned way, things just shifted into position. I was lucky, in other words. And I was unlucky in another sense because certain parts fell apart and I had to, on the spot, cement them together and improvise. It's difficult and it's live and it's real, and that's what real work is like. It's unpredictable. And that's why people don't do it. That's why people find procedures. They find tools to do it, procedures, they find a training, all so that they don't have to feel it themselves, all so that the bare roots of their own intelligence doesn't have to work. What does it mean to be three-centered, to reach fusion in the middle story? It means that you have to expose the bare roots of your abilities to actual work in the field. Any kind of resorting to training, to teaching, to existing procedures ruins it. You have to feel the earth in your fingers. You have to do it yourself. That is the only way. I know quite a few people down here on the south coast, people of all walks of life, but those who do things themselves, I can spot them from a mile away. I can feel them coming. Not just men, women also. I know a woman, she sews handmade lampshades. She has to hold about 4 or 5 pieces of fabric together around the structure with the pressure of her fingers and carefully stitch it together because it's a high value item sold to luxury hotels. Could you do that? She has power, and that's a real job, though she complains mightily about that. But at least she uses her body and her life for something real. The real path is of developing abilities, first in the planetary body, then in the astral body, and then in the mental body. And when I mean abilities does not mean spiritual experiences. Abilities means the ability to do things, to direct beams of energy, to heal, to transfer thoughts, to reliably, repeatably do things. And if you cannot do them in the ordinary world, you certainly will not be able to do them in the higher planes, which have the same principles but are far more subtle. Now, I've got a friend who lives up in the Blue Mountains in Australia, and She's a good friend of mine, and she was on a Vipassana Buddhist retreat for 10 days. And when she came off it, I happened to speak to her on the phone. And I asked her what were her practice instructions. Because on Buddhist retreats, they give you an hour of direct instruction a day. And the practice instructions are something like, rest your attention on the bare sense of the breath at the rings of the nostrils. That's a kind of instruction they give you on those courses. So I wanted to know what they gave her. She didn't know. She couldn't remember. She wasn't listening. It turns out that she was sitting at the back of the hall. She didn't think that the instructions were meant literally, and she was sort of doing her own meditation. Here in England, I have a friend of a friend who wrote a book on mindfulness. I've seen this book. You open the book and it's just a mess of words, like the soup of somebody's mind just downloaded. I couldn't believe that this person had written this book, since he had a catastrophically haphazard mind. But that's the English of today for you. For many years I used to have psychotherapy at a large training institute in London. And I met a lot of people there, English people, and almost without exception they were all doing training courses. They were not having psychotherapy to fix their problems gradually over the years and then finally they would teach. They started with the teaching, and then maybe on their course they would do a few hours that they were mandated to. But they started with learning how to teach people. These people, who are typical of modern people, no longer have the sense that there is anything to learn or anybody to learn from, that there's a sense of gradual development towards mastery, and only then do you open your mouth towards another student. They don't have that sense. I was reading this morning about William Marshall, the first Earl of Pembroke, who was one of the greatest knights who ever lived. Marshall was still able to lead an army into battle at the age of 70 apparently, and that was in 1400. Today, most English by the time they get to 60 are just waiting in the queue at the NHS to have some procedure or other. Later, the practice of deliberately destroying the mentioned being impulse called sincerity even took root among them, and now from the day of their arising, or as they say from the day of their birth, the three-brained beings there are accustomed by their producers, or as they say parents, to an entirely contrary impulse, namely deceit. To teach and to suggest to their children how to be insincere with others and deceitful in everything has become so ingrained in the beings of the planet of Earth of the present time that it has even become their conception of their duty towards their children, and just this same they call by the notorious name education. They educate their children to be never able and never to dare to do what the conscience present in them instinctively directs, but only that which is prescribed in the manual of various candidate Hasnamusses. And of course, when these children grow up and become responsible beings, they already automatically produce their manifestations and acts just as they were educated during their formation. That is to say, just as they were taught, just as they were suggested, and just as they were wound up. I'm going to read something from Siddha Rameshwar, who was an Indian Advaita teacher of superior caliber. I'm fortunate in that I'm half Asian, so I can actually understand these things, and these days I recognize that civilization is almost incommunicable to outsiders. The only Westerners I know who really understand Indian culture are those that have chosen to live there. Para-Brahman is not perceptible by the senses, but it exists. That which is not perceptible is Para-Brahman. That is real, which exists, but is not visible. If one says that it does not exist, even that person who says so is himself only Para-Brahman. If there is a form, its body or shape is knowable, and it can be known, perceived, and understood. However, the shape or form of the self, which is he himself, has no shape or form at all, and is not perceptible. One ends the inquiry by saying that it is unknowable, but it is always one with you. The tragedy is that you do not admit to its existence, and that it exists as your own self. The understanding that I am Shiva, is perceived by the eye of the inner vision of understanding, which is Shiva. The earth is giving support to all creatures. It is called the ground or Bhumi. Just as all things appearing to our senses are on the ground and of this earth, likewise everything that is visible is perceived on the invisible existence of Para-Brahman. It is because of that everything begins and ends. We cannot go anywhere else outside of it. There is no leaving that. Everything ends, all gets destroyed. However, that which does not end remains, and what remains is that. These are powerful words from Siddharameshwar, and they are meant as a kind of invocation to trigger something inside of you. However, the Gurukul traditions in India were meant for students who would live with the master and absorb his presence, his way of life, and many other things over years. And only in that way is the tradition to be understood. It is not to be understood from intellectual analysis of the words. Now I am going to cross-reference what he says with Gurdjieff's perspective. Although Siddharameshwar talks in a very traditional way, he is in fact talking about life in the astral body, which is where he is. From that point of view, you can say that everything that is visible, everything that is part of the earth plane, is not the self. You are seeing it from the function of the astral body, which has been gained by long spiritual practice. He says that Para-Brahman is that which is not visible, but it exists. The reason it is not visible is because this planet itself is tuned to facilitate the work of our middle story, which is what is visible. It is visible because the planet itself makes it visible. And what is invisible, or what we call the astral body, is simply the next tier up, and there are other tiers after that. He says traditionally that it is a tragedy that you do not admit to its existence. The mistake there is that in fact it does not exist for many people, because they do not have an astral body. But if you sit traditionally in front of an Indian sage for many years, you will eventually develop one. Another distinguishing feature of his kind of discourse is the sense of a true identity and of the true existence. The reason for that is that most human beings simply live with fragmented functions. You live in a false reality. For some reason, something is separating you from it. Reality begins not from the head, not from the top, but from the fusion of your functions in the middle story that is caused by long, difficult, practical work. Thanks for listening. You take care. Have a lovely week. Goodbye.